Hello and welcome to Career Center. I'm Kimberly White, Executive Director of the Community Career Center, a resource center located in Naperville, providing job search and professional development advice to clients. Joining me today is career coach Michelle Rademacher to discuss the facets of career changing. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you.
I had to get through a lot of that to get to you. So I'm so excited to have you here today. I know we talked a little bit about career changing when you and I met, and I really want to get into that for our clients. But before we do,
sure.
Tell me a little bit about your company and who you are and what made you start RP.
4C. Yeah. RP4C actually is an acronym for Reach People for Careers. And I will probably get into this in our program, but I really felt pulled into career coaching because there are so many people that really struggle in their careers. So the company focuses on guiding people from a spectrum of, hey, I need some guidance in my resume. I've been in my career for 15 years. I'm going to start looking. Haven't done a resume in 15 years. What do I do? To the folks that are knowing they need to make a career change and need a strategy how to do it. So it's a big, wide spectrum because we have high school-aged clients all the way to senior professionals.
So what does that process look like when a client first reaches out to you?
We really have a conversation, and I will say, Kim, that a lot of people aren't sure what they need. I think a lot of the folks that find us is because they are lacking clarity in their career. I think we specialize in helping bring clarity to the folks that we work with, and that's just dependent upon their goals and what they're looking to do, but most definitely it's focused on careers.
So when they come to you, you have that conversation, and then you kind of create a plan. And how often would you see a client?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll give you the best example of the one that's the average client. So we're working with them usually on a spectrum of a month at minimum to 6 months at maximum. Usually clients are coming to me because they're ready to make a career change, position change, and so we're taking them through a little bit of self-discovery so that they know more of who they are and what their contribution is to the industry that they are either in or the one that they want to go to, and then helping them land the job. I don't consider the job done until they have arrived at that new position or the promotion, because not every client is looking to leave their company. They're just looking to better position themselves in their career. Yeah.
So when you say self-discovery, how do you do that? Are you doing that by with assessments? Is it through the conversation? How do you kind of bring them through to that point where they've kind of have arrived? This is what I want to do.
That's a good question. It's a both and. So I do like using assessments. The ones that our company focuses on are the ones that have the greatest longevity over the course of a career. So you're going to meet, well, you do meet a ton of coaches in your work. So everyone has an opinion about that. When I was choosing assessments to work with, I wanted the ones that were going to have a lasting impact on the clients that come to work with me, so that if they're using an assessment in their services, which we do, it will be something they can carry with them. And I tell clients they're going to graduate. So we're going to have an ending point, and you're going to be able to take that knowledge and go forward in your career. But the assessment tools I use are, one is Workplace Big Five, which is based on the 5-factor model. The American Psychological Association has said that's the gold standard for using an assessment tool in the space of hiring and et cetera.
You might want to talk a little bit about those 5 factors.
Yeah,
we should do that.
The other tool I use is called UMAP, and it's I think the best way to describe it is it's a roadmap to yourself, and it focuses on the 4 pillars of career satisfaction. One being strengths, so those are the natural talents. You didn't actually learn them, you just have them. Yep. The second is values. Those are the deal makers and deal breakers for people in either needing to make a change or in choosing companies. A lot of things that are unpacked with that. The third pillar would be for motivating skills. And we might get into that when we're talking about the need for career change. The fourth is your career interests kind of tucked into personality. I think that fourth one really ties into the passion piece. A lot of people say, follow your passion. That's okay advice, but it's actually quite misguided.
So are people surprised when they go through this self-discovery, especially those when their strengths and their weaknesses and all those things?
They really are. And I love it as a coach because I love seeing them have their aha moments. But I think I'm definitely not the first company to have said this, but you really have the greatest impact in your life and in your career, the work that you do, when you really know who you are and what your contribution is to that industry or to that work.
Fascinating. I love assessments. I love when people can self-discover. I think all that stuff is
It's really good. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. Let's get a little bit more personal and talk about you. I know you've gone through a career change.
I did.
Yeah.
Twice.
So, twice. So let's talk about when you went to school, you planned to do what? And then where did you start to
veer off a little bit. So when I was in high school, I decided to become an architect. And I really was only following one particular pillar, if you will, if we look at those four that's foundational to a satisfied career. And it was because I was passionate about architecture. So I pursued that with a little bit with blinders on. I was good at drawing. I did math fairly well. I liked building things. I could see things three-dimensionally, spatially.
All good things for an architect.
Check, check, check. Yeah. I visited an architecture firm and the career day, but I really failed to look at every part of the architect role in the day-to-day. But I still went to school for it. I actually have an undergraduate and a master's in architecture, and I did 12 years in that profession.
You don't get to play around a lot when you're going to architecture
No, you
school.
do not.
No,
It was busy.
Work,
But it was something that I pursued, and I did have a lot of joy out of it, but there was enough tugging along the way that made me think I might have misstepped. But sometimes I think a lot of folks that are stuck in careers, it's because, well, shoot, there's a lot of money behind me with my degree. There's a lot of time invested, and that becomes a little bit of a stumbling block to make a change.
So how long were you doing
that? I was in the profession for 12 years before I actually finally pivoted.
And what made you decide? What was kind of the thing that said it's time?
I can actually go back to 2011, 2012 when I knew that I needed to make a change. But it took me years to really relinquish that. But it also was because I didn't have proper guidance to know what the next step was. I was doing a lot of things that I'm sure a lot of folks do, which was taking assessments on my own, maybe going to like a seminar. I really didn't even know of a concept of a career coach at that time, and I wish I had, because I could have gone through that process faster.
And so you said you made two changes. So what was
the second
pivot?
So I loved architecture, and I kind of took a sabbatical year to discover a couple of different things. I fell into executive recruiting mostly because I was being recruited so much that year. The architecture industry actually remains a very hot talent market right now. So if anybody's watching that's in that space, it's a good year still to be looking at opportunities. But I found that I was really good at connecting people, and I knew that industry really well, so I felt like I could help people find really good positions that were good opportunities for them, like kind of that talent bridge maker. It's one of the other things I talk about in my business now. I just do it in a reverse way. I did that for approximately 4 years, and I enjoyed it. I really did. But I also felt like there's only one person that actually gets the position, right? So you have these other slew of candidates that you wanted to help, and so I found myself just tugged into that space of, gosh, I want to do something more for them. So career coaching became the calling because I could impact more people. And if you were a client or a candidate, that I'd recruited, I could now instead focus on, okay, Kim, what are your priorities here? What is it that you want? Let's help you get that job. As opposed to finding someone to fit them into the job. It's about making it the right fit for you.
Right. So you talked, I know, earlier about this, but just to maybe expand upon this a little bit more. Signs that you realized, when you realized, you know what, I need to make this change. What are some other things that
Do you know the biggest indicator to me was stress level was exceptionally high. And I say that with caution because I don't want that to be like, I'm sure flags are going off for everybody if they're like, well, stress is stress in the workplace. But actually, one of the assessment tools in UMAP is using StrengthsFinder by the Gallup organization. And they say that when you are not using your natural talents, that your stress levels will increase. And I link that because that really was the case for me. So that was one really big indicator. Work was no longer enjoyable. It was exceptionally stressful, and the work hours were unbearable because there just was that much to do with a lower talent market.
So stress was number one. What else?
The second was just that lack of clarity piece that I talk about with clients. I didn't know what was wrong, but I knew something was wrong.
Just didn't feel right.
Yeah. it was like, but that was the scary part because I'd spent so many years in that profession. So it was like, well, what would I do next? That's a lot of, what would I do? So it took some time, which is why I wish I'd had somebody walking alongside.
to kind of help you do that.
Yeah.
So one, stress, two, just that clarity. And
it was such confusion about what would be the next step. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. And I find that for the clients I've coached now, Kim, as a career coach, that is always, those two go hand in hand. There's stress level that they basically reach a boiling point that they need to make a change. But in addition to that, they do not know what. It's almost kind of like, I think you could be just so stuck in the day-to-day of what you're doing that it's difficult to step back. Kristen Sherry, who's the creator of UMAP, she said this in our certification process, and I just loved it. She said, in self-discovery, it's really difficult to read the label inside the jar. It is. So when you are the one going through all that, isn't that a good quote? When you're the one going through all of that, it's really hard for you to read what's going on the outside because you're stuck in the middle of everything that you're processing. So as a coach, a career coach, I come alongside that person and I help them pull out those details that they need to see to be able to get the clear picture and to chart the course and where they need to go.
Yeah, and obviously everyone would be different. So specific things that you say to those who are going through this, what are some things that you would share with someone that said, hey, I just don't know what to do?
For like they're right at that precipice, like they're watching, they're like, I think this is me, I need to do a career change. The very first thing I would say for them to do is, if they're serious about it, get connected with a career coach. Because if they are serious, they want to make that change faster. And there's definitely a strategy to walk through it. If they're not so serious yet, they're just kind of like, I'm dipping my toe in the very baby pool, right? Then I would say, get plugged into the local resources, because that's where you can begin to do very casual discovery of options that relate to your current field. But I think my biggest encouragement to them, Kim, is that you can change. Do not let yourself stay stuck in a career just because you think you can't do something else. I think that fear of change is something that holds a lot of people back, and there is a little bit of that to be credited because it's not the easiest thing to make a change, but I wouldn't ever take back my other career for that peace, that freedom, that just there's a fluidity to walking in the calling that you have on your life. And the whole thing I talk about with clients all the time is you have a purpose. You are here for a reason. I encourage people in that because I think not enough people are hearing it, right? So let's understand what that is for you and let's get you lined up to that. I think we're going to see a really big shift happening basically industry-wide, nationwide, even seeing it with my connections through LinkedIn across the world. People are getting lined up to what they're meant to do. And it's okay to be able to make that change. I think that's giving them permission.
Yeah. Do you see that that change? When I think about it, back in 2008 and 2009, it was totally different than now, right? And so the fear was clearly different then, but there's still a lot of fear now.
I think that's a great point you just brought up, because a lot of people think that the disruptions that happen to them, let's say they're unintentionally unemployed, they just got let go. Oftentimes, that's the intentional disruption that individual needed to course correct. And I'm so glad you mentioned it, because I was let go in the early part of 2009 as a part of the big recession. Architecture obviously is a part of the built world. It's going to slow down. We're not going to build new buildings or new spaces if we don't have to. And that really was, if I look back and kind of see through the bigger picture, that was the first time that I really probably should have paused.
You know what? When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay.
So, all right, we're going to take a few minutes, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Michelle on changing careers. We'll be right back after these important public service announcements.
I'll never forget the day our landlord called and said, read your lease. No pets allowed. My owner tells him my dog ate the lease, but that didn't work. And now I'm stuck in a shelter. But this pit bull is ready for a new crib. I'm loving, loyal, and play well with others. So don't be intimidated by all my muscles, because the biggest one I have is my heart. That's right, I said it.
Welcome back to Career Center. I'm Kim White and continuing my conversation with Michelle. Thanks for staying with me.
Yes.
So we had started to talk about the fear people faced in 2008. When, 2008, 9, 10, to today, even changing careers. I mean, a lot of people, I think, as you mentioned, decided at that point it was probably a good time to do it because things were changing. Give me your thoughts around that.
Yeah, it's interesting because for me, I can look back and wished I had just explored a little bit more because I could see that was an intentional interruption in the course that I had charted. For some in the industry, and I say this with just a degree of seriousness because they didn't want to leave the career, but they had to because there weren't jobs. So there's a lot to be said for that time period professionally. There are a lot of folks that they came out of school with a degree in architecture and it's like there's no jobs to be had. So what is great about architects in general is that they actually have learned how to problem solve really well. So they are able to flex into a lot of different roles, I think, by nature of how the education is. So all is not lost.
Right.
But I think that there is that fear, and so you do have to learn how to adapt. But I think when we're talking about it in terms of career change, if you're recognizing that there's a fear that you're not sure about what to do or that you don't think you can do it, that's when you have to just kind of silence that voice. Because in reality, everybody has transferable skills. And I think that's where people miss it. You know, it's on paper for me to go from an architect to an executive recruiter. That's actually a pretty big leap, right? But I have natural talents as somebody who connects with people. I'm highly adaptable. That's just kind of built into me, right? So I can flex
Those are those
fast.
strengths that we
Yes,
talked about.
exactly. But then the skills that you learn on a job in architecture also can translate to other roles and opportunities. And that's what we do a lot in the UMAP coaching process, is help people to see what is it that you really enjoy doing and how can that be, surfaced or shown in the next career that you're making. You have to kind of chart the course, and there's some fine tuning, but I think if we can silence that voice of fear, you can actually step forward in some confidence. The recession that we all experienced was challenging, but I think if we're looking at the fact that our circumstances don't define us, actually, and neither does our career. I think we can't build our identity into that. And I think that was another thing that I had to let go of. I had built up a very successful career in architecture, and that's how I built my identity, which is why I think a lot of people have a hard time letting go.
So people shouldn't look at it as a step back if they're looking to change careers.
No.
Those perceptions out there, misperceptions, if you will.
Right. It is a misperception. I mean, if anything, it's looking at the fact that what could your future look like if you actually were doing the things you love to do. I just caution people against hearing advice from others that are well-meaning to say, follow what you love. Because I did that. I followed what I loved. I loved architecture. And I actually grew to dislike it because the work of it was draining the love of it. So don't let something that is perceived as a joy become the job. Instead, intentionally named the business RP4C, standing for careers, because it's about when you talk about having a career, you're enjoying what that is. If you say you have a job, do you like that job?
Like that?
I don't think so. And I think I want to make sure it's really clear to viewers, I don't say career as in it's a white collar, high paying professional job. A career can still be something that is more technical or more trade focused, but it's still the fact that you enjoy it. Right?
Right, for sure. So what would you say has been the biggest benefit in changing, in taking your career in a new direction?
Oh man, only one? Okay.
You can tell me 2 or 3.
Right. But it's a good question to ask for the biggest benefit. There is a piece that I have that I could never have had before. When you are in the flow of what you are wired to do, your daily tasks, I talk about this with clients, you're never going to get to do everything that you love to do in a job. A perfect job does not exist. Right? Or a perfect career in that sense, the daily tasks. But you can do most of it that way. So I think the peace and just that harmony that exists in my life, I wouldn't trade that ever. And then I would say the benefit I get is the joy of walking alongside people to help get them aligned to what their purpose is, what's their calling, helping them to get clarity so that they can actually walk in that.
So no regrets at all at taking this career in a That's so,
I know.
Yeah,
none.
So I know we talked a little bit about this, but you went from architect and then
Executive
recruiter, and now you're doing your own thing as a career coach, which is awesome. So, were there, or has there been, and I think we touched on this just a little bit, but like no regrets at all about doing that? Like this is just, you're confident this is what you were meant to do.
Yes, and there's no regrets. So I'm affirming the fact that yes, it's absolutely what I wanted to do. And I think if someone's watching, because we talked about this, like career changer, take heart. Take heart. Take heart. Yeah. It is something that is a little bit of work ahead of you. But if you could basically describe 2 days to somebody, and one is like the dreaded Monday, and they just can't handle it, and they're stressed, they're frustrated, they get home from work and they're mad at their family because they're just dealing with so much stress at work, versus you have a Monday you can't wait to go into work for, and you're working with a great team, and you leave the workplace and get home to your family, and it's like, guess what happened today? You're excited about it. Weighing those things. Recognizing, yes, it takes some work, but what would you give to have a more productive, a more enjoyable every day? Absolutely. One thing I talk about with folks to help them understand the gravity of this, if we do very conservative numbers, someone's career could span 40 to 50 years, and that's taking it right out of college typically into maybe like 65, but most people work longer than that. And so when you break all that down into numbers and you look at the enormity of those hours, it's not to stay stuck in something like that. Absolutely. I would encourage people all the way from they're in their 20s and they're like, but I went to school for this and now I just hate it. Yeah. Even to the folks that are in their 50s and then the latter half of their career, it is not ever too late, and it just takes an intentional strategy. Yeah. Really does. I've seen it happen for clients. Yeah, I love hearing that. And that's why, I asked a couple of times about regrets, because I know when we talk to clients, oftentimes, there's that fear and what if I do it? What if I regret it? And we hear that all the time. So that's why. There's actually two things tucked into the fear that kind of to help people like understand which one they might be dealing with. I think there's a fear of not being able to make the same amount of money that they make if they're just a long history of it. Well, if I change careers, am I going to be able to have that same salary? There's that fear. And I think the other fear is, well, I don't have any experience in this career that I might want to go into. And we can work through that by strategy. But if you let either one of those stop you from even taking an exploratory look, then, you've already just stopped yourself. Yeah, that's not good. That's not good. So what are some examples of career changes you've helped guide others through? Good question. So I would say in a lot of cases for my clients, they've been a close cousin. Okay. So, I think we can do a leaps and bounds kind of career change. I actually think mine's an example of a leaps and bounds. Architect, daily tasks to an executive recruiter, not the same, but I can showcase how that's similar. So close cousins would be somebody that's in an industry and they're pivoting just a little bit to another. So let me give you an example of interior designer to workplace strategist. Okay, so they're taking a little bit more fine tuning of the role that they want and going after that. In my case, just to go to the case of the leaps and bounds, it's the fact that I was able to pinpoint what I was really skilled at. I took industry knowledge and applied that to that new industry. So for some that are thinking like, I really would like to go to this, they probably have a lot more to offer in that, Kim, than they realize. Because you don't have a tug towards something if you don't have something to give to it. So recognizing what you can maybe take from your past industry experience and apply it to that. And in my case, a lot of it was the skills that transferred. So I'm highly adaptable to being able to work with a lot of different people, a lot of different clients as a career coach now. And I learned that in my architecture industry. I did a lot of interior architecture. It would happen all the time that like a client would have a fire for a design emergency and we have to drop what we're doing on a CD set and pivot. It didn't bother me. For others it would have, because it just went against how they were wired. But for me it was like, no, that's fine, So that kind of thing. Yeah. So give me an example of someone else who you've worked with that's kind of done that leap. I haven't had anyone that's done as big of a leap as that. I've had more that are like the marginal pivots. But I would say don't shy away from it if you see yourself doing the marginal leap. You can have people, let's say they are working as an engineer and they want to go into medicine. Let's be realistic with the fact that that requires education and it requires a detour, but I would still be encouraging of them if all the data showed through assessments and conversations and coaching that that was the right path. So I want people to understand understand. I'm never going to discourage the path that they're looking at unless there's red flags that I'm seeing. But you can still see those that are able to take what they do. So I'm glad you're bringing this up because it's not as simple as, I want to be an astronaut.
Right.
Okay, good. Yeah. But there's steps involved with that, right? And so we want to make sure that you're making smart, intentional moves towards that, if that's really where you're supposed to be. But I think most people it's rare to have the leaps and bounds change. It's more the dialing and the shift. But I want those that are thinking of a leaps and bounds change to be encouraged, because it is. It really is. You just have to know what you're willing to invest in making that change.
Right. Do you have a lot of folks who need to go back to school and get some other training?
No. And actually, this is one that might be a good follow-up conversation in general for the show, and that is about the change in the conversation relative to higher education. Because there's a lot of people that actually are very qualified to do certain work that may have had a different degree, and probably there's a lot of folks watching that are career changers themselves. They don't even realize it. They might have spent like 3 or 4 years in the degree or working with the degree that they had, but then they pivoted. So you can have folks that went to school for broadcast journalism and then they found themselves in a sales role that might be working with the equipment that comes into the space to do the show. So there's some things about how once you finally get lined up to where you want to be. But if you realize that what you learn in school and how that can actually apply in a different way, I think learning to be adaptable is a really critical factor. And there's probably more people that have done career changes than we realize.
So what are some, as we kind of think through all of this and your own successful career change, what are some takeaways for people as they go through this, who wants to be successful like you in doing it?
I would say that if they're really ready, the success comes with the conclusion and the landing in the role in the career that they want. And so I'm assuming that that's how most people are going to define success, right? So I would say buckle up and be prepared to actually do the inner work to unlock all the wonderful things about you. I also remind folks, Kim, that they're all unique. I love working with so many varieties of folks because they really are really different. I could have one architect and another architect right by me, and they're unique because of how they've been made. So I encourage people to recognize it's going to be a process. And for me,
not quick sometimes. It could be
not absolutely quick, but not long either. I really have the philosophy as a career coach in my business is that I want to equip you with the tools for you to thrive in your career and that you will graduate. This is not about being attached to me forever. It's that philosophy of teaching someone to fish versus feeding them every day. So I think that the success comes with adhering to a strategy and to recognize that coaching is necessary. There's no great athlete ever that didn't have proper coaching. So if you really want to do well in your career, go alongside a career coach and actually get that, those tools, those, coaching sessions to equip you in the best way to thrive in what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely don't try to do it alone.
Well, and here's the thing, you can take my example. I did.
You did.
It took years.
Michelle, thank you so much. This went by so fast.
I know. It was fun though.
Thank you so much for joining me on this month's edition of Career Center. I appreciate that. And to our television audience, if you are in a job transition or looking for job search, professional career advice, visit the Community Career Center at 1815 Westdale Road, Suite 900 in Naperville, or search us on the web at communitycareercenter.org. Thanks so much for watching.